Friends and enemies, welcome to yet another edition of the Mighty CBP on the CBP Media Network. I'm Len the Legend, and today Joey is not going to be joining us, but we have a competent replacement. In fact, he's way better than I am. I'm lucky to have him with me, Mr. Arno, but he's going to be joining me in just a moment. Price all-time high. We are vibing. Hopefully everybody has cracked open a beer or a cold one, whatever the heck you have. Make it worth your while. But before we go any further, I just want to go right into the sponsors. We have to talk about them. They are crucial to the show. We have Easy DNS is our first sponsor, the sponsor that's been with us for the very longest. For people out there that want to start your own website, you are in no better hands with them than with them. Or if you already have a website, you can migrate your website over to their services. You can start your own email service. You can migrate your email servers over to theirs. They are absolutely wonderful. You could do a Noster nodes. You could do so many different things with them, but there's a couple of good things. Number one, you could pay with Bitcoin. With the price of Bitcoin being so high, it makes sense to start paying with your Bitcoin, right? They'll be happy to take your Bitcoin or your dirty fiat, whatever you choose. Either way, Easy DNS has been in business for decades. I say this because they've been in business since the late 90s. A lot of other companies have come and gone, but they stick around. They are providing good service to you. You are number one to them when you sign up with them. And if you open an account and you use our promo code CBP Media, 50% is going to be taken off your initial purchase. So you might as well sign up with a crap load of domain names, sign up with a hefty email server, great website, the whole 9 yards. Make it a big one, because then 50% off means it's going to be a massive savings for you for that month. So check it out. EasyDNS.com. CBP Media is the code. Sponsor number 2, we have Bull Bitcoin. Look, price of Bitcoin. What can I say? It's showing right now behind me. Actually, that's the block height, but it looks awfully close to the price of Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin has you covered if you want to buy, if you want to sell. On-chain, Lightning, whatever you got, they'll be able to help you out. Fees are still relatively low. Let me take a look right now through my node. What are the fees? Last I checked, they were extremely low, and still they are 11 sats per VByte. So it's relatively cheap in my opinion. So do your on-chain buys, but also learn something else like Lightning and buy and open your channels. So when you do have to buy with Lightning, Bull Bitcoin has you covered. There's not just simply buying and selling with Bull Bitcoin. There's other things you could do. For example, if you have to pay your bills, look, a lot of us, we have bills to pay. Hopefully nobody's delinquent like I am. Pay your bills on time. And if you have a large stack of Bitcoin, you could tap into that to pay your bills. And Bull Bitcoin will have you covered to facilitate the buy with that. Also, you could get these gift cards. What you could do with these gift cards, you can start spending the Bitcoin in the real world. Look, Bitcoin, like I kept mentioning, it's very, very high in terms of value. Might as well start spending it. You can't right now. You can't go to McDonald's, for instance, start spending it, but you could buy gift cards through a Bull Bitcoin and start spending your Bitcoin, indirectly like that. So check them out. Open an account. If you haven't done so, $21 is going to be added to your account. No questions asked. And the last thing we have is Decentral Tech. Decentral Technologies, what can I say about them? We have the CBP Media BitAxe coming in the very near future. Should be shipped this month. Home mining solutions got you covered. So if you want to have a quiet home miner, they can hook you up. Or if you want to have a loud one, they can hook you up. You want to have a BitAxe? You want to have an S19? You have the whole range, the whole gamut. They are going to provide it to you. They have a lot of different options. They provide great service. If you have any questions to do with mining, repairs, just anything, check them out. Decentral Technologies, based in Canada. So if you are Canadian, you're looking to mine and you want to do some home mining, these are the folks you want to talk to. So check them out. And without further ado, let's bring in the real host of the show. I'm just here as a prop today, Mr. Arno. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing really well, Len. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you stepping in for pitch hitting for Joey. For those who are unaware, Joey's wife, obviously, she's pregnant and the whole 9 yards. So we need somebody to do the job. And you are no better than it. Like you're the best person I think that could do it. Like, in fact, I'm gonna walk away, let you do the show all by yourself, if that's okay.
Oh, wonderful news! Wonderful news. Well, in that case, happy all-time high, Canada. This is the Gnome Show. We're going to be talking about all the reasons why, before you go head first in the all-time high, remortgaging your home and following all the ludicrous things that Sailor says, you want to learn about securing your keys, setting up backups, learn about coin recovery and how to do that for yourself, learn about air gaps, learn about setting up your own entropy. We got a whole bunch of stuff and a whole lot of new users to learn about things with. So welcome to everybody, and congratulations to everybody that held through the bear market. You saw 17K and now you get to see 89. Good for you.
It's been a wild ride, and that 2021 and 2022 year was incredible because we hit 2021. I think it was like 69K was the all-time high, give or take. And then within a year later, we were down to 17, 18K, even 15, I think, within the end of 2022. That was quite a drop in a short period of time. It was just a lot of events that happened in a very short period of time between some shitcoin failing.
And even regardless of the events, I mean, like, this is just what Bitcoin does, right? It's what it's going to do this time, most likely too. Obviously, nobody knows for sure anything, and past performance isn't future performance, but I really want to stress to those that are buying at this point, please be ready for the drop. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to happen 5 years from now at 100 times this price, but I do know that Bitcoin frequently sees 80% plus drops in its price. They're temporary, and it's the people that panic that hurt themselves. So if you're not ready to hold, there's a reason that we say don't invest more than you're willing to lose. And it's because those are the people that panic and they hurt themselves. So don't be one of those.
100%. So anybody that's new to this game, like they just saw the price, they decided, heck, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin or anything that's related to it. We could discuss that later. But if you think that this thing will continually go up, it's not. If that's the case, everybody would have done this a long time ago. The drawdowns, they're real. They hurt, and you got to be ready for it. So if you don't think that you could stomach a 50% or greater drop in a short period of time, I suggest get out right now and just look at it from the side, because that's the reality, that this thing will go down. As you mentioned, when, we don't know, but it will. As for how much too, we don't know. I will make one guarantee though. No, I will make one guarantee. The price will never go to zero. Because I have a bid at 1 cent for 21 million Bitcoin. So that is
well, I will be outbidding you for 2 cents.
So there we go. We have a guarantee. It will not go to zero.
There's a floor on this thing for sure. And I actually know that this actually has happened before. I remember maybe 2016-ish, Adam Back got in an argument with somebody about, Bitcoin hitting zero. At least I'm pretty sure it was Adam Back. And he and some other Bitcoin Twitter users started literally putting orders for 100% of the supply at the bottom of the order books, like at 1 cent, at 2 cents, at 3 cents, like for just every coin in existence.
That's incredible.
Just to prove that this demand exists, because it does. Like, you may be listening to this thinking like that's ridiculous. Like, if Bitcoin actually crashed to a couple cents, like you wouldn't want to buy it. But the reality is like, we are Bitcoin. An investment in Bitcoin is an investment in ourselves. We are the node runners. We are the backbone of the protocol. We decide what Bitcoin is, and I've decided it's valuable to me and my life. Of course, I'm going to buy it. I've functional use for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you live on a Bitcoin standard without going too much into too many details, or are you still not there yet?
So I've been all in for about 10 years. I've been in that time, obviously there hasn't been a whole tonnage of Bitcoin merchants that take it directly. There's a lot of merchants and services that will take it through intermediaries and custodians. And I end up using a fair amount of those. I use Bull Bitcoin, one of your sponsors. I use their bills payment service, BYLLS, quite a bit. So there's a lot of middleman involved in most of my daily stuff. That said, there's also quite a few instances of direct transactions, usually in the places you wouldn't expect. So I'm able to buy a lot of my meat directly in Bitcoin from my local farmers market. In fact, I find my local farmers market, especially in the more rural locations, people are very accommodating when I want to pay in Bitcoin directly. So I can get my beef, really good beef, with my Bitcoin. I can get local shawarma with my Bitcoin directly. I can get stuff like rent I pay through bills, groceries as well. I use a middleman and gift cards and stuff for most often, but there are instances where I get to use it directly, and those are really the best.
Now, for people that are listening to this or watching this and say, I want to do the very same thing, keep in mind that you've been in this game for a long time. So you've been stacking for a long time.
Yeah.
So you were buying when the prices when were high and also when it was very low. So for people thinking that they're just going to buy in today and do the exact same thing, I wouldn't recommend it. I suggest
So you
buying and
can,
holding.
like I bought initially somewhat near the top of a bull market. I was in for a long time, and for a year or two in about like 2012, 2011, instead of buying in, I was really focused on making sure that I understood Bitcoin, that it was worth buying into, that my funds would be secure. And one of the first things that you really realize when you're learning about Bitcoin is that it's an economic security model. It's got all this hash power and it's consuming electricity, and that hash power and electricity form a cost to mutate the state of the Bitcoin ledger, the blockchain. And so it's only really as secure as that cost to attack. Frankly, everything is. Everything's economic security, from your doorknob to your email account. And Bitcoin's no different. It's just a little bit more direct about it. It says, you have to spend this money on power and resources if you want to earn Bitcoin through the block subsidy and fees and append to the chain. And so, like, to attack Bitcoin, we talk about things like 51% attacks. We talk about things where miners have to basically, like, spam put in economic resources into Bitcoin. And I was very focused on the idea that there had to be a minimum cost where I was comfortable putting in money. Until that minimum cost to attack Bitcoin was reached, I wasn't comfortable going all in. And by my back of a napkin math, I decided sometime in 2013 that it was worth going all in on, because I felt like it would cost me, somebody would cost them a sustained input of millions of dollars over the course of months to attack it. And that's really all that you can do when you attack Bitcoin, is you can maybe like deny service for a little bit by mining nothing but empty blocks or filling the transaction network with spam, but it costs money to attack it. And that's how we secure it. So for me, I've been on this journey for a long time. I got in originally, like I said, dabbling around 2011, 2012, but wasn't comfortable putting money in until about 2013, when I realized the cost to attack was significant. And then to your point, I bought largely at the top of the 2013 market. There was the pump to 300 in April of that year, and then there was the Mt. Gox pump to 1,100 in December that year. And those are the times that I bought, because at those points is when the security of the network was actually higher because of the cost. So that was great for me, except for, you might recall that we then entered a 4-year bear market. And so I was in the red for 4 years, the first 4 years that I was, heavily and all in Bitcoin. And people going in right now, people that follow Saylor's, frankly, disastrous debt advice, need to be aware you're going to have to survive potentially 4 more years. Plan for a scenario where Bitcoin gets banned in your lifetime. You might see a decade of bear market simply because of forces outside of Bitcoin's control or scope. So if you can't handle to service your debt for as long as you might be underwater, don't go into debt to buy Bitcoin ever. It's dangerous. Don't be very careful when you're listening to like these Saylor folks that are saying, remortgage your house. He told people to do that at 69 at the top of last cycle. Those people that remortgaged their houses and followed Saylor's advice, if they couldn't service that debt for 4 years, they don't have any Bitcoin anymore. They lost their money. It's gone. And the ones that did manage to service their debt for that long, I mean, the amount of money they paid servicing the debt probably has them only ballpark even around now. So it's a very dangerous game. You are not Michael Saylor. You cannot get debt for free the way that Michael Saylor can. Be careful and be ready to be underwater for a little while if you're buying at the top. Save some gunpowder so that you can still buy when and if we should dip. That's my advice to users that are joining right now.
And when you do buy, keep in mind, the way I was talking to somebody this morning is, you're putting that money and it's just buying Bitcoin, and you're not going to touch that for a long period of time. So essentially wave goodbye to that money. So you better not have that money earmarked for rent or food or whatever. It's extra, it's play money, it's whatever, because you're not going to be selling Bitcoin in the not too distant future. It's going to be probably a long time away before you start selling it or exchanging it for a good or service or whatever. So that money, you better not need it for something. So that's the right mentality. Don't go into debt, use extra money. And if you want, squirrel it away for the time when there is a massive drop and then execute a buy then. or just buy on every month or every few weeks, whatever it is works for you. There's lots of different options, but certainly going into debt is not one of them. That's the wrong thing to do. The Sailor's idea, it works for him, like you say, because he could get debt really cheap. And also when you mentioned that interest rates were very, very low, and it's gone up quite a bit since then. And so we're at the mercy of some external factors about the cost of that debt. You don't want to have that hanging over your head. It just could create a lot of sleepless nights.
There's a reason we say don't invest more than you're willing to lose. That really is important.
100%. I just want one thing, Noam. If by chance my screen goes black, I have been having a little bit of connectivity issues. I come back within 30 seconds or so just bear with me.
I will just carry on and the Gnome Show will continue. The propaganda will flow. The education will be heard. All shall rejoice.
And you mentioned the 4-year bear market from 2013 to 2017. There was one additional thing that was done during that time. There was a block size war that was fought. And that's something I don't think we'll ever have to deal with again, at least not in that scope. So
I actually think that is one of the larger existential crises Bitcoin faces. I see the next block size wars coming. I see all the things that led us to the past block size war recurring. And it spans from look at who led the block size wars. It was Coinbase. It was Barry Seabird or whatever the hell his name is. It was Wu and Bitmain. It was these miners that were biased by the profit that they can make scamming people. It was companies who are biased by the profit that they can save by not optimizing their transaction usage and by simply shoving all of their costs onto node runners. And I think that the next block size war, fork wars type event is actually going to be including a lot more government interference as well. I think that governments are going to say, hey, ETFs, hey, Coinbase and businesses in my jurisdiction, this is the fork that you're going to adopt because the other one has a new anonymity feature that we don't want you to use, or whatever the hell else. And all of these businesses will, happily go along with it, as will all their custodians, because that's the financial incentive. They want to stay in business, and these people have all of their money. So I see a huge potential room for future attacks on the Bitcoin protocol. The culture has become very apathetic to things like running a node. If you don't run a node, I want you to be asking yourself, who are you trusting when you look at your Bitcoin balance? How do you know those Bitcoin are there? When you transact and you get a confirmation, what makes you so confident that that confirmation actually occurred? If you're not running a node, you can't answer any of these questions positively because you don't know what the state of the Bitcoin network is. You aren't defining Bitcoin actively. You're not watching the forks and competing blocks. You're coming from a state of trust or ignorance when you don't run a node. So I want to encourage all the new users. I want to encourage all the old users. Please run a node. I do think that it's possible we end up in another block size war type event. And if we do, you will be very grateful for running a node when that happens.
And I'm grateful for the people that have fought the previous or the only block size war to date, because I'm able to run a node with relatively modest hardware. And if it wasn't for that fight and winning that fight, I would not be able to do that. And my node is right here, 3 feet from me, and it is a 14-year-old laptop, and it runs it fine. It's running Bitcoin Core just fine, doesn't complain, doesn't do anything. I wouldn't be able to do that if the blockchain was massive. I wouldn't be able to do it with a 1 terabyte hard drive or 2 terabyte hard drive. It would just be extremely large, and it would cost me so much more to do. So that's one thing I have to be thankful for, is the people that fought the war. They did it, and I'm the beneficiary of it.
We're all the beneficiary. Bitcoin maintaining its decentralized properties, which is nodes are where the decentralized properties of Bitcoin come from. Being able to everybody run it and everybody verify all of the transactions from the dawn of time and not have to trust anyone else is what gives Bitcoin its unique properties and why it has value at all. There's so many people out there that are so eager for things like ETFs or not holding their own coins because they think it's dangerous, but they don't seem to realize how every single cycle, and I guarantee you we're going to see it again in 2 years, we see countless businesses fail as soon as there's the dip. Last season, it was FTX. and a bunch of other exchanges, there will be more next time. This is what our future is coming. So like, be aware that these events are likely to happen. Protect yourself. Don't keep your coins on exchanges. This is another thing that I'm seeing a lot of traders come up in, this price action. A lot of traders eager for fiat and dollars, and they're keeping their money on exchanges. And what they don't know, and what I want to tell your listeners, is that when your coins are on an exchange in the bull market or the bear market, and you think I'm going to scalp or I'm going to leverage and it's fine because I've got a stop loss, or it's fine because I'm watching it and I'm there. These exchanges get very frequently DDoS'd either by natural use and a lack of investment in their servers or malice. And those stop losses don't execute. The exchange will go down for 12 hours to maybe even a couple of days. And when it comes back up, the price will be dramatically different. The dust will have settled. You will be locked into trades that you couldn't have been pulling yourself out of for whoever knows how long. And a lot of these traders end up losing their ass to counterparty risk because they don't understand what trusting these exchanges means. It is not a risk-free thing being a trader. You can't just hedge everything on a stop loss. You guys need to be very careful out there.
It's funny you mentioned the exchanges going down for a period of time, because the previous times we got close to an all-time high this year and even achieved it, Coinbase, for whatever reason, just like clockwork, went down. But now this time around, this past week, I haven't heard of it going down. It seems like it's an anomaly. It's remained up, and
we haven't peaked yet. See, you're looking for peak indicators, traders. It's when these suckers go down. That is when.
So, and another thing, and first of all, I just want to just go into the weeds really quick. For anybody liking what Mr. Arnome is saying, you could find him on the Bitcoin Discord. He is a moderator there. The signal is off the charts. Check that out. Look at the website that he's posted here, bitcointech.help. Check out that if you want assistance. He and the people over there are absolute gems. So I would suggest anybody out there that wants to get more information, to dive deep into Bitcoin, to ask questions that's not shitcoinery, that's the place to go. So go to the Discord, Bitcoin channel on Discord. You're in good hands over there. Just wanted to pump your channel there.
Oh yeah. So to pump my own, toot my own horn. I'm really impressed with how this bull market is playing out now. Some of the people that have been around the community for a couple of these cycles know, as I'm sure you do, Len, that the community tends to degrade pretty significantly in terms of high signal content when price action occurs. Basically, everything becomes about price. You get these huge floods of new users. You experience this, we call it the eternal September problem, where all the new users dilute all the old users and change the culture and give a lot of really bad advice. And it becomes just really difficult to educate yourself or anybody else. But in the bitcointech.help chat, this specific bull market I've been finding, it's the best I've ever seen it. Like, there's basically no shit coining going on. I haven't had to ban or mute really anybody. There's a ton of new users. They're all talking about Bitcoin. Yeah, there's a lot of price discussion. Yeah, the signal's a little degraded, but compared to the last couple of cycles or other platforms, oh my goodness, it's night and day. I'm in love with the chat that we've built over here.
And so that website points directly to the Discord. So if you don't know how to open up the Discord and get to it, that's the way to just easily get there. And that's awesome to hear that this cycle is much better than previous cycles. I just want to touch on one thing quickly too. And I mentioned this, I asked a question in the Discord, on Bitcoin Discord, is that now with the price being at an all-time high, interest seems to be also at an all-time high. In fact, if you look at Google, you could see that the trend showing that Bitcoin searches it's spiked. And, people want to know a little bit more about it, want to learn about it, etc. So with that being said, I would have expected that the transaction fee would have jumped immensely high because people want to transact with Bitcoin, buy into it and move it to their wallet, but it's not the case. It's still relatively low. It's somebody, I wish I could give that person credit, but mention on the Discord channel that it's because people are buying and just leaving it on the exchange.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well, is I think that that's a sign that people are buying and leaving them on exchange. people are getting ready to flip. These are people that are interested in dollars, not Bitcoin.
And that, I mean, just goes back to when you leave it on the exchange, historically, there have been some very bad events for people that have trusted exchanges. Not everybody has gone rug pulled, but a large enough portion of people have been and were never able to recoup what was on there. So what I'm trying to get at is one of the fundamentals, one of the characteristics of Bitcoin is you could hold on to your Bitcoin. Don't let somebody else do that for you. Back in the day, we used to remember telephone numbers easily. I still remember telephone numbers from my childhood and I could rhyme them off. If you could remember telephone numbers, remembering words is just one step further. It's not a great leap further. It's just a small step further. And that would be one way to easily secure your wealth. It's not that hard to do. I mean,
it should be said it's very dangerous relying solely on your memory.
No, it's just one way.
One of the reasons that I really like Bitcoin is it's programmable money, right? So something that I'm a big advocate that people do is if you have a large amount, have more than one way to spend it. Like maybe have it so that you've got a multi-sig key and you can spend it when you get all your multi-sig keys together or a majority of them, but then also have another spending path on like a time lock that you can give to your relatives or your friends, the people that will inherit your will. And it's like, okay, if something ever happens to me after X amount of time, these coins will become spendable by my friends and family. Or if something happens and I lose access to my coins, there's some kind of disaster and I lose my keys, I still have this other way to recover my coins in like a year or whatever. So Bitcoin is about not relying on these, central service providers. There's no chat you can call up for help. I mean, other than ours and the ones that we make as a community that are free. But we don't have any authority. We can't log into your account and fix it for you. We can teach you how to fix it yourself. But really, it's all about you and what you prepare for and how your diligence plays out. And part of that should be, what is the worst case scenario? What happens if I lose my keys?
Yeah.
What happens if my memory fails? What happens if I get hit in the head and I'm in a coma and, I don't even remember ever owning Bitcoin? I still would like to have my financial security in that case. Past me needs to take care of future me.
And Liana Wallet's one that you recommended for doing time lock, right?
I have, yeah. So very newbie friendly. There's no like programming involved. There's just kind of drag and drop and button pressing, and you can set up exactly the kind of spending conditions that I'm talking about.
So it's Liana Wallet, Liana, for those who are looking to do some research into this. Now, I just wanted to change topics really, to what really the big thing is now. It's the price of Bitcoin, right? And people that's what's driving a lot of the interest. That's what most of the people that are newcomers to this, that's their metric of success. The price. It's not anything else. It's the price going up versus what I bought it at. And unfortunately or fortunately, that's really what's going to drive a lot of the interest. It just recently surpassed the market cap of silver. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but just today. So silver, if you think about how much history it's had behind it, all the silver that has been mined to date, Bitcoin has surpassed that market cap. So that's interesting. Now, a lot of people are attributing this pump to the election in the States that wrapped up, and Donald Trump is now the president-elect.
I'm not sure that I'm entirely on board with that narrative.
Okay.
I'm sure that many people have bought because they're excited about President Trump and what they think he's going to do. He's proposed a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which I think is an actually very good policy that I've been lobbying for Canada for quite some time. But let's take a look at the broader situation here. Bitcoin has value whether Trump is elected or not. And in every past US election that has been happening around the same time, them being on a 4-year schedule as well as us, we've gone up. So I expected that unless the 4-year price cycle has been broken, which frankly, there's every reason it should be broken. Having supply doesn't naturally impact price the way that it used to. It's just too small of an amount of supply change. But still, this 4-year price cycle seems to carry on. We are basically right where you would expect us to be, 7 months after halving. We are past the old all-time high and rapidly pumping to new horizons. So it's entirely possible that we continue following this 4-year kind of price cycle, and we go through a year of bull market and then another horrible 80% drop along bear market. And I think that it's entirely plausible that would have happened with or without Donald Trump.
Do you think that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
If he does put together a Bitcoin strategic reserve, it will be one of the most important things that has ever happened to geopolitical Bitcoin adoption.
Are you familiar with the details, which are, I mean, it's kind of scant at this point, but what little has been shared? Are you familiar with what have?
So I heard Trump's speech at the Nashville Bitcoin conference. Oh my God, that was a rough listen. It's tough to listen to that man. It seemed very ill-informed. It seemed like he was repeating talking points that had been given to him that he didn't really understand or think about, especially in the context of RFK's speech, which happened shortly before his. And RFK's speech was frankly very well informed, very cogent, a lot of discussion about things like how good Bitcoin is for the power grid and, you know, hard money and backing treasury bonds, and a little bit of insanity in terms of buying all the freaking Bitcoin forever, but generally very well-informed speech by RFK. Trump's very ill-informed, but, you know, obviously there are people that are backing Trump that are, you know, have his ear, that are trying to push for this strategic reserve. So I'm hoping that happens. That'd be a very good thing for Americans. And I think that as a Canadian, we also have to be kind of wary of what's happened in the United States. Trump obviously represents the populist right. And the last time Trump got elected, we kind of saw a global wave of right-wing populism. We saw Brexit. And I think that we're going to see that here in Canada too, a little bit of right-wing populism rearing its head. And to both the right and the left, I say to you this: if you're on the right, congratulations. Like, you're doing it, you're getting your Bitcoin, buy it, hold it, secure it, fantastic. If you're on the left, congratulations. You're right about everything. The world's on fire. Everything's gone to shit. Escape to Bitcoin. It's the way out. Protect yourself. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. Buying Bitcoin right now is a good thing for you to do.
Do you think that there's any credence that the Bitcoin ETFs being in existence might have something to do with the Bitcoin pump happening? Because if you look at the inflows, like, for example, just today, in fact, they were saying...
Absolutely. So, and this is why it's dangerous, though, is if people are buying the ETFs instead of Bitcoin, they're not buying Bitcoin. So the price is going up. Yeah. Is this ecosystem getting healthier? No, it's getting less healthy.
People they have a false sense of security when they buy it. And I'm not trying to say that it's imminent that something will happen. I'm saying that there's a potential that something could happen. And as the value of Bitcoin goes up, and as the number of Bitcoin that's held in these ETFs increases as well, I wonder if something does happen, is if there's any mechanisms to make investors whole. It's going to be a heck of a lot of insurance that has to be paid out.
The insurance doesn't cover any of this stuff. Like, so like, you have whatever coins the ETF says you have. They define what Bitcoin is for you. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier in terms of, I'm afraid for the next fork wars. What happens when the interests of these ETF managers don't align with the interests of node runners?
Yeah, so Boomdust was saying earlier, he's hoping for a block war 2.0 because he's talking about BlackRock trying to do a fork. And
so Boomdust is on point with this. The real best thing about being attacked as a Bitcoiner is that they pay you. They pay you. Like, when the block size wars happened, I made bank. Everybody in Bitcoin that was defending the protocol, dumping the scam coins, made money just for being there and protecting the protocol. If BlackRock attacks, like, that guy's absolutely right. We are going to get huge payouts. It doesn't even matter if their attack has the majority of users in it. Because, like, look at all these custodial users and people that really aren't interested in Bitcoin. They're interested in dollars. Any government fork or BlackRock fork is going to appeal to those people enormously. They may even have a majority. But it's not going to matter because they have to pay us. We get their coins, and then we get to dump that into Bitcoin again.
It's an absolute bonus. It's like Christmas.
I am
Here's some freebie.
so eager to be attacked again. That last attack bought me a house. Like, please buy me another one.
Did you see anything about there's this new Bitcoin Act that's being proposed, and it's very far away from even becoming a law. It still has to be voted by the House, the Senate, and so forth. So, the idea behind it is the United States is going to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin in a 5-year period of time. Have you heard about this?
The only thing I've heard that had anything similar said was the crazy speech by RFK at Bitcoin Nashville, in which he basically said that he wanted to buy all of the Bitcoin and print all the money to buy all the Bitcoin.
That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure like if you followed what's going on with the Federal Reserve. We could talk about that later, but it looks like there's going to be some fighting that's going to be going on between the federal chair, Jerome Powell.
Yeah, there's possibly some political misunderstanding in the federal government of the United States about whether they can or cannot fire people at the Federal Reserve. You see, and we actually have this same problem in Canada too. I don't know if you recall, but Pierre has frequently in the last 4 years been very critical of Canadian monetary policy, often for fair enough reason. But his response to that unfairness has been to suggest that the government, fire people at the Bank of Canada. And he doesn't seem to realize that that's not how this works. They're an independent organization. They aren't just arbitrarily fired by political whim and things like that. And the same is true in the United States. They can't just fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
It's done by appointment, but then the appointment is for X amount of time. So like Jerome Powell, for instance, I think goes till the first half of 2027 is when
I think it would take an act of Congress, which I suppose technically they have now.
Yes.
So if they want to do it, there's a way to do it, and it's not by executive order.
Now switching gears, we touched upon this earlier, but Michael Saylor, the guy that's associated with MicroStrategy, he announced today that they bought another 27,000 Bitcoin to the tune of around $2.03 billion. So remember, they were supposed to raise $41 billion, $42 billion. That was announced a week or two ago. And so they said with that $42 billion, they're going to be buying primarily Bitcoin with that money. And here they are, they're starting the process. And they are a big holder of Bitcoin. They have almost 280,000 Bitcoin under.
Are they a big holder of Bitcoin?
Comparatively,
do they hold any Bitcoin?
So they have claims.
Don't hold any Bitcoin at all. Let's just be very, very clear about that. People who are buying MicroStrategy are buying something that themselves does not hold any Bitcoin.
Yes.
And I gotta be honest, like, I don't understand how all these people simping for MicroStrategy can tolerate this constant stock dilution, and let alone like all the FUD that Saylor talks about. Bitcoin isn't a currency. Bitcoin's bad for the environment. El Salvador should pound sand. Like, it's just ridiculous.
So the theory behind it is they're looking at the metric they're using is sats per share. And even with dilution, if the sats per share goes up, then shareholders, for the most part, seem to be satisfied with the direction they're going.
It's funny. We were joking earlier that Blockbuster could do exactly what MicroStrategy's done, and they could, buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin, and it really has nothing to do with their core business. Their core business is, a failure in doing whatever it's doing. But as long as they pandered to enough Bitcoiners and, convinced them that they would be this wildly successful company just by merit of investing in and owning Bitcoin. And that's how I view MicroStrategy. Is like they're not even a company anymore. They're a pandering play that exists solely to enrich Michael Saylor at the expense of Bitcoiners.
So Madman Monroe writes, not everyone needs or wants self-custody.
I mean, Bitcoin kind of mandates that whoever owns the keys owns the coins. So to the extent that if you want to participate in Bitcoin at all, you kind of do need to self-custody. There's really no way around self-custodying if you want to participate in Bitcoin, at least at the minimum. You can participate in Bitcoin without a node if you self-custody because you're signing your transactions. That's part of the Bitcoin protocol. But if you have no keys, if you never interact with the protocol in any way, shape, or form, you have no claim to Bitcoin as far as the Bitcoin network is concerned. You just have nothing.
Agreed. All right. There's an interesting story, and I want to hear your thoughts about this, is that the guy by the name of Dean Skurka, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. If I didn't, my apologies, Dean. He's the CEO of an exchange called WonderFi. It's a publicly traded exchange.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they have, Bitcoin and a whole bunch of other things that they sell. This guy was previously the CEO of BitBuy, and BitBuy was gobbled up by WonderFi not too long ago. Anyways, Dean was kidnapped and held for ransomware. And I didn't mean to laugh, but it's actually an interesting story. This guy was nabbed. For people who are aware of downtown Toronto, he was in the University and Richmond area, so right in the core of downtown Toronto. And last week, Wednesday, at 6 p.m., he was nabbed, and he was forced to give up $1 million. And later, he was released at Centennial Park. And Jameson Lopp was mentioning that this is the 171st instance of suspects using physical violence to steal Bitcoin that he's aware of. There could have been more than 171 instances.
He keeps a pretty good database. Meat space attacks, Google Lopp Bitcoin meat space attacks. There's a GitHub where he's tracking all this.
So this is the 171st version of this. Now, this is going to be more problematic moving forward as price of Bitcoin goes up. People are aware people own Bitcoin. That's why I think, like you mentioned, having stuff like time lock Bitcoin or just something that provides a level of protection against this. I think in this case, Dean had to give up some of the assets that were held by the exchange, WonderFi, I'm guessing.
That would be my assumption, but I do not know for sure. So, like, first of all, if you're a customer at this exchange, like, you messed up. You messed up being a customer at this exchange and letting them hold your money. The shitcoiners guys got a long history of being just kind of a scummy Bitcoin business owner. Not that that's a reason for anybody to deserve what happened to him. Like, that is horrible what's happened to him. But this is why you wouldn't want to hold your coins on one of his platforms. And two, yeah, this is a lesson for the entire community in how to protect yourself from some of these things. You obviously can't stop a person from putting a gun to your head. That is something that is always possible, and as has been demonstrated, can happen on a busy street in a downtown major Canadian city. So there's really no preventing this. We know statistically, if you introduce your own weapon into these situations, you increase the likelihood of your own harm dramatically. So Bitcoin, I think, provides a very good game theoretical approach to reducing the severity or impact of this kind of danger. You want to do things like use Liana Wallet and have multiple spending paths. You want to limit access to your own coins and tier your wallets. So, like, maybe you've got a wallet that is a hot wallet or is a lightning wallet and you have full access to all the time, anywhere in the world, and it carries a very small amount. And then maybe you have a colder wallet that is generally offline and has some emergency funds. But then your actual stack, your life savings, if you're going to go all in on Bitcoin like me, you've got life savings, and you want those to be totally inaccessible, even to yourself. You want to put yourself in a situation where you cannot spend them. So you use time locks and you use geographically distributed multi-sig so that you can't meet the spending conditions easily. Accessibility and security are opposite ends of a spectrum. The more accessible your money is, the less secure it is. The hope is that if somebody puts a gun to your head, you can give them the hot wallet. You can even maybe give them the cold wallet if they have enough time and they're, because the truth is somebody's robbing you. They probably got things on their mind and they're looking to get out of there as soon as they can. So you can maybe give them those two sets of wallets, but you can't actually give them the other wallet, the cold coins, because you don't have access to them. And you know that if anything happens to you, your family or whomever will be able to recover those coins. So you've got like this built-in will that is part of your Bitcoin, this insurance policy. The hope is that the incentive to take the hot wallets is large enough that they will simply take those and go. There is too much trouble, too much risk, and not enough guaranteed payout trying to chase someone for coins they cannot spend. When you could have to, like, what are they going to do? Kidnap you and everyone in your family for the next 3 years? Like, they're going to be jumping all over the country trying to find every one of these keys that you tell them are. Like, even if you fully cooperate with them, they're still going to be stuck waiting for the time lock. And yeah, what are they going to do? Just keep you hostage so that you can't outspend them on those coins? Like, it just creates this horrible game theory problem. So the hope is that game theoretically they're incentivized to just take what money you can access and leave you alone. And this applies to businesses too. If Mr. Wonderfi would have kept his consumers' funds not in a hot wallet, if he had done something like BitMEX does, for example. BitMEX has a nightly board meeting and they only withdraw once a day. You have to be part of the one batch transaction that they do because they bring all of their keys together that they need to spend, and they spend it in person once a day. It's not a hot wallet. You can't just, so like if their servers get compromised, their money doesn't go anywhere. And this is what businesses should do. Businesses should be practicing the same kind of capital controls and accessibility controls as individuals are in these situations.
If I could even throw a wrench into this whole thing, and you talked about earlier, if there's another block size war and we ended up with a competing shitcoin, maybe that's what we should hold on to. So in case there is an attack against a $5 wrench attack, we could just end up giving the shitcoin that was airdropped to us, and we keep our Bitcoin. So that may be another
I'll take the payout for defending the protocol every day. Give me that. I mean, what did we make on Bcash? We made like between 10 and 15% if you sold within the first week. Like, that's a nice little bonus to your stack. Who doesn't want 15% more Bitcoin?
I missed that by just a few months. It sucks.
Whereas if you wait, then you get nothing because it becomes worthless, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to evaluate these if you want to just sit on the fence, you can, but then you don't get any of the reward for defending the protocol.
Oh, give them testnet coins. Love it.
Testnet coins actually is not. I've actually thought about how I would best scam somebody trying to attack me, like double spend them, like really low fee them, and then RBF as it goes, or child pays for parent the change and just start like a bidding war over the coins they're trying to steal. I think that those are all viable things to do in a lot of circumstances that are unfortunately time sensitive and a lot of people don't think about.
That would work awesome, especially because there are periods of time when the next block isn't built for 30, 40, 50 minutes.
An hour even, yeah.
Yeah. So if you could get it on the front of that and you have to wait, it's very much possible you could execute that strategy.
Sneak in, like they're robbing you. You sneak in the fee at like 0.1 sat a byte. Like,
fuck them.
See, it's in your wallet. I see it right there. It says so. I sent it. I promise. Don't shoot me.
Let's talk about this guy called Roman Sterlingov. Again, another one I hope I pronounced correctly. I'm not sure if you heard about this story. This guy was associated with something called Bitcoin fog. Bitcoin fog I've never heard of before, but apparently it's some wallet that has mixing services or mixing features. And there was claims that this guy was been running it for a period of 10 years, from 2011 to 2021. And it just so happened he was tried and sentenced and found guilty of money laundering, conspiracy to commit money laundering, operating an unlicensed money transmission business, and money transmission without a license. Now, this dude says that he has used Bitcoin Fog wallet, but he claims he's not the dude behind the project. And as per his defense, it said that most of the evidence at trial was circumstantial, and neither the Bitcoin Fog server logs, private keys, or ledger were ever entered into evidence. So it looks like this guy, based on this, might have been made an example of. But have you heard of this Bitcoin Fog wallet before?
I haven't. This sounds like one of those centralized mixing services. So to contrast this with something like what happened to the Samurai devs, Samurai Devs ran a centralized non-custodial service, and they were accused of conspiracy to commit money laundering because they made a couple tweets suggesting that people should avoid sanctions through coin joins, right? But this is different. This sounds like a custodial mixing service, traditional money laundering. Maybe they don't have them dead to rights because, as you're aware, when you're looking at Bitcoin forensics, a lot of it is circumstantial evidence. You don't know exactly who owns what address. You're working with a lot of things like probabilities, and relying on the people you're targeting as a prosecutor or a law enforcement to basically make mistakes. It's like the internet. You're as private as you want to be. If you keep your UTXOs separate, you never are combining them for anything nefarious or sketchy. And you're using layers like Lightning and Lightning swaps, and you're using coin joins to feed your Lightning channels, like you're going to be quite private. There's not really ever going to be anything but circumstantial evidence possibly against you. Is that what this guy was doing? I don't know. I highly doubt it, considering he wasn't running a non-custodial service as far as I understand it. But even if you do a lot of these things right, we've seen what happened to the Samurai Devs. The reality is that they will make up charges to put you away. And we don't actually live in a law-based or fact-based society. And we see this over and over with Bitcoin, like, for example, with CSW, with Craig Wright pretending that he's Satoshi. How many years, a decade almost, of his lawsuits and false claims when everyone who has ever been willing to verify his initial fraud, his initial proof, can show that he's a fraud, that he was using timestamp manipulation to create a hash collision. That should be provable, and it is, but unfortunately our legal system lacks the technology literacy and isn't set up to verify things. Our legal system is based on social argument. It's not based on facts or proving anything. So it has allowed all these abusers to do horrible things in the ecosystem, like CSW. And it also allows the prosecution of, I don't know about innocent, but certainly on false charges, people like the Samurai Devs. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for people running custodial mixing services, though. If you're running like a traditional money laundering service, you get what you got coming.
And to tie a bow in the story, this guy Sterlingov was given 12.5 years in prison. That was his sentence. So
in Canada?
In the United States.
I was about to say, because that's a hefty sentence for Canada for financial crimes.
So, I mean, now, a story that kind of ties into this, and I never heard you talk about it, is Ross. We heard about him, the guy that was behind Silk Road, and apparently Trump may pardon his sentence, and
he's promised that he will. Whether he will fulfill these promises, we're not sure.
Right. That's
also, I think Ross is guilty of a lot of stuff. Do I think that guilt should translate into 2 life sentences plus 40 years with no possibility for parole? No, I don't. That is incompatible with my idea of what justice is for pretty much any crime. If he was tried in Canada, he would be out right now, even though he, for example, put out a hit on people. It wasn't part of the trial other than the sentencing, because we just took it as fact because we basically have it. But he put out hit on people, and he was running this darknet marketplace and selling illegal weapons and drugs and all this other stuff. He committed crimes. He should do some time. That said, should the time be literally multiple lifetimes plus 40 years? No. I figure if Trump were to pardon him now, he's basically done, 8 years, 9 years, something like that?
I think 10.
That's fair enough. I wouldn't cry if he served another 4 and he got pardoned at the end of the term. Do I think he should be pardoned? Yeah. I think that sentence is absurd for pretty much any crime. There are so few crimes you could commit where I would say, yeah, you know what? 2 life sentences plus 40 years, no parole for this 20-year-old kid.
Bitcoin is saying 11 years, so that he corrected us both. So
thank you. Yeah,
it just
I lose
adds
track
fuel
of
to the
time in these cycles.
And I mean, just another story, because we're kind of getting up to the hour mark where we could transition to the rest of the stories. Have you looked at this collider script bullshit?
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
allows for covenants without a hard fork type deal.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it allows for covenants without a hard fork, but with their own, ASIC network to power through these covenant locks. Like, it seems totally impractical. Like, I would think that a fork should be dramatically more practical than a whole new ASIC industry built around these hash-based time locks.
In terms of, from what I understand, to make stuff like OpCat a reality under this system would require millions of dollars of processing power.
Yeah, they want to build basically a parallel mining industry where what you're mining is these covenants.
And so this is really just a proof of concept more than anything else.
This is somebody described it to me as nerds masturbating, and that's basically how I see it as well. I don't see any of these proposals as remotely possible or plausible. I suppose they are possible, but why? No, let's not build a new entire ASIC driven mining network just for. No, let's not do this. If we want covenants, let's pass something like CTB. Let's end this ridiculousness.
Now, doesn't this shine a light on the fact that there has to be some scaling solution that we adopt moving forward? Because this is, just as you call it, nerds masturbating, but still it kind of achieves something where it improves scalability of Bitcoin. So something's gonna have to be done with this, right? Eventually.
I really like that when you allow the protocol to mature on its own and people continue to have use of these tools and they don't change, there's no forks, you see new features being created through the protocol. People innovate with the tools that they have, and that's certainly what this is. It's an innovation using the tools that they have, doesn't require a fork, and that in itself is a worthwhile line of thinking. We should be thinking like that, and we should be very cautious about adopting new forks instead of allowing this natural evolution to occur. That said, I think this is just a stepping stone on the path of that natural evolution. This is not a destination.
We have somebody from the Discord joining in here. Not just a new ASIC network, one significantly larger than Bitcoin's current hash rate for any actual throughput.
Yeah, it's frankly, I think that the proposal is absurd. It's fun and interesting in the way that masturbating is, but it's absurd.
Okay, I think with that, we'll end the Bitcoin segment. So Noam, don't do anything because we're just going to seamlessly transition on the the video side. But for people, it will be seamless. Because the people on the audio side, this is going to be the end of this segment, and there'll be another one coming the very next day. So with that, I would suggest everybody take care, enjoy this pump day, and we'll be submitting the rest of the episode tomorrow. But for people tuning in already, just stick around. We'll be
happy all-time high day, everybody.
Yeah, man. Take care. So that's 58:30. Okay, perfect. So we could just transition to the rest of the stories, which is, first off, I'm just going to say, have you looked at the price of gold recently?
I've never looked at the price of gold in my life.
Okay, I'll give you an example. So the price of gold, for let's be honest, people would look at gold as a store of value, and historically it's been a great place to do so. But for the past decade or so, it's been pretty shitty in terms of that. It hasn't been all that great. And just today, we have Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin jump up quite a bit. In the past week, Bitcoin jumped up, like 10%, a little bit more than that. But gold in the past week has dropped 4%. I think there's something going on here, maybe an unwinding. Somebody suggested to me as a thought, maybe there are people starting to sell their gold allotment, maybe an ETF, a gold ETF, and maybe buying a Bitcoin ETF. So there could be a slow transition now of capital from gold to Bitcoin. So
what you're saying is that if we hooked up a steam generator to Peter Schiff's temples that we would probably be able to power the Bitcoin network with how pissed off he is right now.
But he's irate, absolutely irate. So Boomdust says gold has doubled in the past 5 years. Bitcoin has doubled in the past 6 months or something like that. Whatever the fuck it was. So,
well, we've gone from what 20K at the start of this year, 30,
something like that. Granted, we're talking right now. Gold is what, a $14 trillion market cap, so it's a huge ship to move. But still, comparatively, it's very slow in reacting. And the fact that it's gone down on a time where people are parking their money in an asset that they want to see protect themselves from debasement in the future, and they're picking Bitcoin rather than gold. To me, that's a telling sign and very encouraging as a Bitcoiner.
It's like I was saying earlier, I think it doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum. Now is the time to buy Bitcoin to protect your interests. I love how agnostic it is to political beliefs. Everybody thinks that their political beliefs are being represented by Bitcoin, and they're right. But what they don't see is that everyone else's political beliefs are also being represented by Bitcoin. So it's fantastic that there's this incentive for everybody. This is the thing that the right and the left and everybody else, we can actually agree on. We want sound monetary policy. We want decentralization. We want people to be in control of the policies that they're governed by. Certainly monetary policy is one of those. And I think that we're going to actually see an expansion of that in the coming decades, where people put more and more of what would previously be government policies into action through Bitcoin in layers with their own governance models.
But the first thing we're going to have happen is we're going to have cheap credit, because the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates another 25 basis points this past week. And we could, as Bitcoiners, you can say what you want about it. We all look at the price denominated in US dollars, and the Federal Reserve's, their decisions impact the price of Bitcoin heavily. And the fact they cut interest rates again, not as high as a lot of people thought, is interesting. But this is going to be in a line of a series of cuts to come as they trend towards zero. Their overnight lending rate will eventually get to or close to zero. So it's going to be cheap credit for all eventually. But we touched upon it earlier. But the best thing about this rate cut, there was a press conference after, and Jerome Powell was there, and they were talking about him stepping aside if asked to leave. And he said, no, he's not going to do that. It's not, he's going to stay on regardless if Trump asks him to resign or not. So it looks like there's going to be some sort of civil war going on between the White House and the Federal Reserve. Not the best time to have this, I think, when you're trying to stabilize markets and try to ensure that people are supporting the currency and there's faith in the currency. When you have the Federal Reserve chair and potentially the president-elect talking at ends, this isn't a really good sign to me. So it's all the more reason to buy Bitcoin. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that like people care what the Federal Reserve does because it impacts the price of Bitcoin. And I'm going through my mind of all the possible actions that a central bank like the Federal Reserve or the Bank of Canada can do to impact Bitcoin. And I'm not sure they have the ability to impact it negatively. If they raise interest rates, it means they're printing money and they're trying to stamp down inflation. Printing money, good for Bitcoin. If they are lowering interest rates, cheap credit, people are going to take cheap credit, dump it into Bitcoin, raises prices. If they adopt Bitcoin, something like a strategic reserve, good for Bitcoin. If they ban Bitcoin, that ends all of these centralized attacks. It kills all of these shitcoin exchanges. It enables Bitcoiners to be using peer-to-peer and decentralized marketplaces and more anonymous technologies. That's good for Bitcoin too. Like, there's not an action that a central bank has available to it that's negative for Bitcoin. Everything they can possibly do is a good thing for Bitcoin.
It's either you're going to speed it up or slow it down. The adoption
even if they try and slow it down, they just make it better. Like, say they banned it. If tomorrow the United States or Canadian governments banned Bitcoin, in those countries, Bitcoin would be healthier. There would be more node runners. There'd be more people using and giving volume to peer-to-peer exchanges like BISC and RoboSats. And there would be less scam victims. There'd be so many less scam victims because it'd be illegal. So I like, there's just no losing here. And this is people say, oh, like holding Bitcoin the way that you are, like you're gambling as much as anybody on the stock market or at the casino or whatever. Like, I really don't see it that way. I see the way that this game theory plays out as a very asymmetric risk game. Bitcoin can only go to zero, but it can go to infinity on the other end of the scale. There is so much more to be gained by just having Bitcoin, understanding Bitcoin, having hard money at all, than there is to not. Like, it's not going to a casino. It's not gambling on stocks. This is function that I've personally been using for over a decade. It's fantastic.
I think we established it's not going to go to zero. There is a floor here.
Yeah, we are putting in the floor. We are.
So yeah, boom dust. If Canada bans Bitcoin, this becomes the Canadian.
I like this boom dust guy.
He's a great guy, and I want to plug his stuff. He's in the Ottawa area, and he runs a Bitcoin meetup Wednesdays, I believe. Every Wednesday. I could be wrong, but either way, he's on Twitter. Check him out, and he runs those Bitcoin meetups. From what I gather, I've never attended it, but high signal. You will learn a lot, and I think Bull Bitcoin has a presence there, if I'm not mistaken, but again, I could be wrong. But he's a great guy.
It's such a rough time with my local meetups. They're a lot better than they were 10 years ago, I'll tell you that. There's a lot less shitcoining going on.
But what was it like 10 years ago? I'm curious what an average Bitcoin meetup would have been like.
So I think one of the worst Bitcoin meetups I was ever at was actually at the Quadriga building in Vancouver. They used to host meetups there, and there was a lot of shitcoining going on. In fact, everybody just wanted to talk about making their own shitcoin and making their own exchange, basically. Very rough, hard to get any kind of quality discussion in. Now, when I go to a local meetup, there's a lot more Bitcoiners. They all claim to be maxis, but they are all obsessed with ETFs. They are obsessed with Liquid and promoting shitcoins like Liquid. And I think a lot of that is Bull Bitcoin's fault. Fuck you, Bull Bitcoin. I don't care if you sponsor the show. Like Francis, you're fucking up. Quit enabling shitcoins or stop calling yourself a Bitcoin-only platform. That's all there is to it. Don't lie to me. And they're just simps for very bad wallets as well. Like when I went to my local meetup for forever, they just wouldn't stop recommending Moon and Wallet of Satoshi, custodial wallets that, like in Moon's case, like there's an on-chain transaction for every Lightning transaction. It's like, what is the point? So, and these are people that have been involved for over a decade, much like myself. So I struggle with how many very confident, seasoned veteran Bitcoiners there are giving half-assed advice and promoting custodial and shitcoiny products. And I'd like to see that change.
It's a lot of pumping of bags. That's the reality. Right? People, they want to have their bags pumped as much as possible, and they don't give a fuck.
Greed drives adoption. It definitely does. But I feel like as good public citizens and Bitcoiners, it is in our interest that people become sovereign node running individuals. That's where we get our decentralization from, is from having these people that are defending themselves and thinking for themselves, and controlling their own coins and transaction information. That to me is the ball game. That's the only kind of adoption that matters. If you're using Coinbase or an ETF and you're not custodying your coins, you don't run a node, like, I'm sorry, but you are not a Bitcoiner. By no definition do you interact with Bitcoin. So please, I urge you, get it off of those custodial platforms. Secure your keys. It's not as hard as maybe you think it is. And there are so many resources to help. I will spend all day helping you if that's what it takes. I will hold your hand and I will walk you through it. You can find me at bitcointech.help, as well as many, many other helpful people. It is not hard to store your own coins.
This Saturday, I'm meeting up with a bunch of folks, and I'm showing them the process on how to use a cold card, and it's free of charge. I go over it, we go through it all, and at the end of the day, they're more knowledgeable, and hopefully they take that knowledge and build on it. But really, this information, it's so easy to find, and people like myself and you will be more than happy to provide that information and teach people the way. It's
in our interest that these people learn how to verify, and it's not about trusting us or trusting anything you find anywhere. There are a million people that are just like us are telling you, hey, listen to us. But what we're also telling you is when you hear something that we say, like we're going to show you how to verify that in code using primary sources. And that really is the difference maker. That's what people need to be doing. And that sounds intimidating. You're saying to yourself, I don't read code. I don't know what that is. It's almost all in English. If you can read English, you can tell what your code is doing.
Well, let's talk about some people that may have trouble with the English language. Is some migrants in the city of New York. And well, I'm not sure how sovereign they are right now, but they're trying to make them more sovereign individuals. And so the reality, the gist of this story is that the city of New York, they announced that they're no longer going to be issuing any vouchers to migrants that are settling in New York. And these vouchers were to pay for food. So this program has ended, and the program was angering a lot of folks. The mayor of New York was saying, as we move towards a more competitive contracting for asylum-seeking programs, we have chosen not to renew the emergency contract for this pilot program once the year concludes. So it was debit cards that were given out to these migrant families, and they were staying in city-funded hotels, and thus they were allowed to buy the food with the debit cards. So far to date, $3.2 million has been doled out to 2,600 migrant families that are living in those hotels. And for example, if you want to look at this further, a family of four was given about $350 US per week to go shopping for food and baby supplies, which, is a decent amount. And they say that obviously this thing is coming to an end. Keep in mind that the city of New York has around 350,000 homeless people already. So they have problems coming out of their ears. But spending money like this, I think, is probably not a great way to control the problem that you have. I think it's creating a bigger problem. It's almost incentivizing people to go there for migrants to settle in New York, but also not dealing with a lot of the existing problems that are there. So the money is just being directed to a different problem that's growing. Like, I don't know. I see shit like this, but it makes me even more bullish to be a Bitcoiner. I'm not sure if you
the same things happen in Canada, right? Like, for example, in Niagara Falls right now, pretty much every hotel there is in perpetuity rented out by the Canadian government to house asylum seekers. And the big problem that we have right now is that our asylum approval process is 4 years backlogged, according to the people in charge of it. So that means we're paying for years and years and years of resources for people that may or may not end up being here for legitimate purposes. It's a big problem that we need to, because we do need to have an asylum system. We need to be able to house refugees, but we also need to very quickly be able to determine between a valid claim and an invalid claim. Knowing that the backlog is what it is, many people are buying themselves time to avoid deportation by hopping, for example, the US border and making an asylum claim. Will they be approved? Almost certainly not, because we don't take asylum complaints from Americans, people that have landed in another safe country. But it doesn't matter. They'll still end up here for 4 years and we'll pay the bill.
So for people who are not aware of this, if you're coming from in between like a safe country, so you say, for example, you come from a country that's war torn. I don't want to name anyone, and then you go to the United States first, then come to Canada and make a claim for refugee in Canada. They would say that you should have made a claim in the United States. You had every opportunity to do so. So your claim to Canada is going to be ultimately rejected. So that's what Norm is talking about.
The only exception is for those that are coming here directly through the UN Human Rights Asylum and Refugee Program, where they may bounce between some other countries on their way here.
Now, in China, they're the second largest economy in the world. It's growing like leaps and bounds. It has slowed down significantly. But one thing that is kind of flying under the radar is just this week, they announced a $1.4 trillion bailout package. This is because local governments, there's a debt crisis over there and they need to stimulate the economy. So they're hoping that this financial injection will help the provincial authorities to refinance existing loans and to provide it services and continue to provide services like paying for public sector salaries. China's a fucking mess. I don't think a lot of people truly understand that this thing is a house of cards ready to collapse. I was saying that Japan is the canary in the coal mine. Maybe China might be it. And I'm not sure if you have any insight into this, but I'm wondering, this is going to have broad implications if something happens there, because they, as I mentioned, second largest economy in the world, and they provide a shitload of fucking goods to us and the United States. And if there's any disruption in that cheap goods, it's going to make life difficult for a lot of folks out there that are living here.
Well, there's definitely going to be a disruption of those cheap goods for Americans, at least when those tariffs go up, for one. For two, I think that the most remarkable thing that we've been witnessing over the last 20 years is exactly how adept our economists have become at kicking this disaster down the road. In China, in Canada, in America, modern monetary theory and financial policy it's phenomenal the economy didn't burst during COVID. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal that China survived their Evergrande scandal or whatever the hell it was with their real estate market. These are things that should pop the market, but because they are doing such a good job, you could argue from their perspective, they're doing such a good job of preventing big companies from going under, preventing government services from going under, by printing money and forcing that inflation and all the consequences on us in the longer term. They have maintained this machine in a way that I'm personally impressed by. Like, it is phenomenal that they have managed to create the situation with that's only as bad as it is. Like, this thing could seemingly go on forever with them continuing to kick the can down the road until they debase the money so badly that they just make a new one. I'm sure they'll call it the real.
And we won't debase the fuck out of that one. You can trust us. We understand what's going on.
They will, like, it just in perpetuity, like in a cycle. Like, they have this down, and they're really good at it now.
Another one that's got a good in terms of figuring things out is in Ontario. Now, Ontario's debt. I don't know where you live. I don't care where you live, but I'm going to say, for people that want to know, in case you want to know, Ontario's debt is $430 billion, which is a fucking decent amount considering it's a single province in Ontario. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but our Premier Doug Ford is planning to give out $200 rebate checks in the coming months, to every resident in Ontario.
Am aware that Doug thinks that he's Ralph Klein. Yes.
And there was an interesting article that was penned in response to this $200 taxpayer rebate. And they're saying that if you don't want Doug Ford's $200 tax rebate, here's how you could send it back to the province to help pay down for the debt instead. Who the fuck is going to not keep the money and send it back to the province so they could pay off the debt? $430 billion is the debt. That's a lot of $200 checks. $200 checks won't even make a fucking dent if you send every one of them back to the province to pay off the debt. Listen, folks, get the checks, cash it. In my opinion, do what you want, but I would suggest
Bitcoin.
Exactly. Buy some corn. Take it off the exchange if you're using a custodial exchange. If not, use a proper one like Bull Bitcoin and sleep well at night. Because in a few years, at least my opinion, I could be wrong, that $200 you put in will be worth significantly more in the future in Bitcoin. But that's what I suggest.
How much more would we rather that the Ford government simply take that money, take the other gains that they can make from public services like hydro and stuff like that, and just dump it into a provincial Bitcoin fund? How much would we rather that? Because let's be honest, $200 in today's day and age, with inflation being what is $200 Canadian, isn't as much as it used to be. It's not buying you a lot. I compared Doug to Ralph Klein, who was a premier in the West in the 2000s, and he also did a similar kind of rebate. It was for, I think, $500 or maybe it was $300 a kid, but that was back when that money was worth 3 times what it is today. So you're getting a very small amount of money in this $200. I would so much rather, as just a little socialist gnome myself, I would so much rather that we all pool that money together and do something about the crumbling healthcare system in this province. I would so much rather we put all that money together and do something about the growing homelessness issues in this province. That to me would be a better use of the $200. But that's kind of not how we govern. We don't add new taxes or take money. We just reduce public services and keep the same amount of money.
I don't know what's the size of your family, but here when we go to Costco to do grocery shopping, which we do every so often, just for an example, now it's hundreds of dollars is the bill, hundreds and hundreds. And in the past, 4 or 5 years ago, it could have been a $200, maybe $300, and we would be able to get a full cart. Now, man, it's just incredibly high. So that $200 that Ford is going to give everybody is like you mentioned, it's not very much. What does it afford you? 3 tanks of gas?
You like right? That Bitcoin meme with the shopping cart, and it's got every 4 years labeled, and every 4 years the amount that you get in the shopping cart from dollars is less and less, and the amount you get in Bitcoin is more and more and more. I love that, because you're right. Like, I go to Costco too, and it is expensive.
Yeah,
it is expensive to fill your cart these days, and I know that all the Canadians are really feeling that, which is why it's so insulting to hear our government tell us that inflation's under control. It's like, yeah, when you hand pick the things that you're going to wait for the number that you want to create, I'm sure it does look like it's under control. But over here, when wages aren't improving and costs are going up sometimes 10 to 20% for various items in a given year, it certainly does not feel like inflation is under control.
So the narrative is that inflation has been tackled. Like the last month, it was reported at 1.6%. Now, that's just the rate of change. The price per good has gone up significantly compared to something, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So that price will probably never come down. In fact, will continually go up. But the narrative is that the wage increase is keeping up with inflation now. And I think
never been true. I mean, we know that it's a lie, because we can see what the purchasing power of something was in, for example, 1970 in Canada. We can see that, a single employment home where one person's a bus driver could afford a house. Like, the only reason the numbers are this way is because they specifically exclude things like real estate. So like they weight things in such a way as to create the numbers they want, and they want specific numbers because in many ways government debt and what they owe to public unions, for example, hinges on the inflation rate, because that's what they negotiate things around. So what the money the government owes is determined in part by the number that they publish, so they manipulate the absolute ever-living hell out of it.
Yeah, like CBP, Canada Pension Plan, old age security, stuff like that, I believe is tied to official inflation numbers. So if those numbers are lower, then their yearly commitments to those line items will be lower as well. So there is, I don't know if there's an strong
financial incentive for them.
Yeah.
Also, there's political incentive. Like, do you want to be the leader of the country that brought inflation down, or do you want to be the leader of the country where inflation went rampant?
Have you seen, I'm not sure if you're following politics, but in Canada, the Bloc Québécois is trying to push for the government, and they have pushed and failed, to increase old age security payments between.
Yes.
And
so if you were to take a guess, how much would you guess that our spending on old age security payments has increased in the last 10 years?
Combined, 13%.
Yeah, that's about what it is now. So like it went from about 5% to 10%. So the amount of the total Canadian budget that we spend on these kind of securities has basically doubled as people are living longer, and we haven't added any new dedicated taxes or anything. And that's created a situation where younger people collectively have to pay a larger tax burden for now more older people that are in the population. Like, there's more old people around today than there was in the 70s, for example.
Yeah. Joey, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just going to give you one quick statistic. Joey often mentions a stat. He said it used to be 7 workers used to pay for every 1 pensioner. Now the statistic is 3.5 workers for every 1 pensioner. So
That is absolutely a correct stat. I verified that today.
okay. Joey's often cited that. So it's just verifying exactly what you're saying in terms of it. It's a bigger burden for the workers. And that is why there is immigration in Canada. Now, understandably, it was quite high for the past few years, but historically, that is why Canada has had immigrants come into Canada to help sustain the economy so that there is a large number of people that are working that could pay for a growing number of seniors. And this baby boomer generation, it's getting, well, maybe not, maybe it's getting smaller these days, but it's still relatively large by comparison to, say, Gen X, which is me, or millennials, which is after, I don't know, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, it goes X, millennials, Zoomers, alphas.
Alphas, I don't even know where that starts, but that's probably now. So, I mean, I guess it just started like in the last couple of years.
Well, the Zoomers are in their 20s now, Len. Like, you're an old man. We're old people. We're like, we have multiple generations under us now.
I'm ready to retire. I'm not sure if you're aware.
I am retired. Like, I made more in this week than I usually make in a year, so I'm good.
But you're still actively doing something. Like, you're just not sitting on the heads.
You never stop. To me, what retirement means is you're no longer a wage slave. You get to own your time.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to throw you a scary stat here that 1 in 4 parents in Canada say they cut back their own food consumption to feed their kids. And this is a Salvation Army report. And they say of the parents they have surveyed, 24% say they have reduced consumptions just to ensure their kids are well fed over the past year. And they say of those parents, 90% said they reduced their grocery bills to put money towards other financial obligations, like, for example, getting cheaper food that's less nutritious, skipping meals entirely. 84% said they're skipping meals entirely. This is like trending totally in the wrong direction. And on top of that, you have Food Banks Canada saying that they have reported 2 million visits in just March of this year alone.
Yeah, I was going to say they're like 5 times what they were 3 years ago.
And that number is going to go, that was from March. I don't think the economy has improved substantially since March. If anything, it's probably worse. So that 2 million is probably 2.1, 2.2.
Yeah, my local food bank is pretty much on me every month to donate more and crying about how disastrous the situation is. And they're not wrong. It is disastrous. I have friends using the food bank.
Holy shit.
It's terrifying the level of poverty we are creating and how widespread it is in Canada. If you look at the Bank of Canada statistics for average earnings, like if you're earning $110,000 a year, you are the top 10% of people in Canada. If you're earning like over 50,000, you're doing better than 50% of people. And $50,000 Canadian is not a lot right now. I think the 30th percentile is like, I don't even remember. I think 40K, maybe even lower, 30, high 30s.
What the fuck could you buy with that?
Where's the poverty line? There is no middle class anymore. There's people that are wealthy enough to survive, and they are an incredible minority. And then there's everybody else, and everybody else is struggling.
The middle class is being uplifted. Like the rest of the middle class is the homes that they purchased, because that is the biggest asset under their belt. And the fact that they have one, I assume they bought one years ago before the price really went up. They're able to live in that home for a relative pittance compared to somebody else that's paying for rent. Or
I was reading statistics from Stats Can the other day. I don't recall them off memory, but it was something to the effect of homeowners of the same age and demographic are 5 times wealthier than their cohorts without homes. So I'm pretty sure it's something like 5 times. They just have a 5 times larger net worth. It's terrifying that, we had a middle class, and they've been doing really well because of home prices appreciating. But because now people can't get a home, we are killing that middle class. The middle class that did exist is moving up to an upper class, and there is no new middle class because they cannot buy a house.
And that's what's pushing politics. If you look at what's going on in Canadian politics, you have the Conservative Party, which is right of center. I would say almost straddling kind of where the Liberals used to be, kind of right of center. under the Paul Martin's days, and you have the Liberal Party and the NDP Party vying for a more lefter side of the political, at least the Canadian political. Political
see, I wish. I feel like everybody is a little centrist right now, except for like the PPP and Poilievre as well. Like, I don't feel like his Conservatives are particularly centrist. I think that they're trying to tap into that same kind of populism that just led to Trump being elected, or has led to Danielle Smith in Alberta, or what's his face in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, wherever the hell it is.
I don't even know his name. But I know what you're talking about. They just had an election not too long ago.
Yeah. And I feel like we're riding that here too. And like in America, culture is an export. And just like the last time that Donald Trump won, and we saw Brexit and everything that followed, I think that there's going to be a wave of that in Canada and everywhere else too.
So look at this. 0x15 AAC. Love
Isaac.
0x. Leaving my home country to own a home outright was the difference between wage slave for a 30-year deposit and a semi-retired before 30. So yeah, and Boom Dust is saying 50K a year is hard to live on. If you have kids, you're poor if you make less than 75K.
Kids is a big part of it too. Like, there's a reason we have to have so much immigration, and part of that is because we don't have kids. And who can blame anybody for not having kids? You can't afford them.
And that's why we bring in immigrants, is to help ensure that there is the next generation of people that could pay for the older people.
Yeah, we just taxpayers. We need a tax pyramid with a wide base.
Yeah. And if we could bring in a family that has young kids, even better, because now you have not just the man and wife, or whatever the dynamic may be, most likely working and providing, but then you have the next generation that once they graduate from school, they have a lifetime worth of earning powers they could tax. So like,
and those are Native Canadians. Like, that is how we grow Canada, in part, is definitely with those people. I think that where we get into a little bit of trouble is, for example, with the temporary foreign workers program. I don't know if you've checked out any of those Lima maps where they show employers that have requested temporary foreign workers, when, how many, whether they were approved or not. But it is disturbing how many employees are being brought into places with very high unemployment rates. We have created a situation where our corporations, especially our retail sector, our Tim Hortons and whatnots, have become addicted to cheap foreign labor. And they have tried to convince us that if we don't allow them to continue exploiting people in a way that I should quote, the United States Human Rights Commission has suggested borders on slavery in some instances. If we don't continue to allow that exploitation, our prices will explode and their businesses will collapse because Canadians just don't want to do the work. And I gotta be honest, I have no time for that argument at all. Canadians were doing work just a couple of years ago. Before COVID happened, we didn't have this flood of temporary foreign workers. So I would very much like to see that program regress to actual need-based things instead of just a rubber stamp to bring people in under false pretenses. And I don't blame the folks that are coming in for coming in either. Like, they're just looking for a job. But have you seen some of the advertisements on these foreign websites? They are so dishonest and disgusting. They're like,
oh, sorry.
Well, I've just like, they're explicitly, they'll be like, hey, job in Toronto, working as a chef, desperately need you, come on down. And like, there is no job, there is no anything. They're just looking for gullible rubes who are desperate enough to do whatever they say to get to Canada and then fill some employer quota so that this recruiter gets a kickback.
I've heard that they even have some people that come here that earn less than the minimum wage. That there are some cases where they're working for cash and they're not even earning minimum wage salary. Or
yes, I've heard of cases. There have been a few, I'm hoping very rare and niche cases, where people have had to pay their own salaries to stay here under the promise that they would then, have a path to citizenship or other jobs or whatever. And that's another big part of this. Like, the reason it gets compared to slavery by the UN is because you can't switch jobs. trapped at that employer, and they can do whatever they want with you. They can treat you however they want because you cannot leave.
Yeah. It's called a closed work permit, where it's only tied to one. There's an open work permit that you could apply to other people. And I was reading this one story from in Oakville, Turtle Jacks, that the owner over there, and he's just allegedly a piece of shit because of the way he was doing and abusing the labor market assessment or opinion, whatever the fuck it's called, to bring in foreign workers. And yeah, like you were saying, that some people had to pay, or it was just pathetic how he was manipulating the system allegedly to bring people here and just string them along. Like they thought there was a job here, they come here, there's nothing, and it fucking sucks for a lot of folks. The system needs to revamp it. I think there's in the process of revamping it, but yeah, Boom does the same. Turtle Jacks
allegedly.
No, man, it ain't. It's just some family restaurant in northeast Oakville.
That's a strip club.
So
that's a gay strip club for a very specific crowd, I think.
Well, then it is that. Mr. Arnum, I appreciate you taking the time to come on this week. This has been awesome. And yeah, without you, obviously, I'd be rambling here by myself, and it would be not very appealing to listen to, or even less appealing to watch. So thanks for taking the time to come on.
I'm very glad to be here. All my best to Joey and his family. I hope that they have a lot of good luck in the coming days.
I hope so too. With that, we'll be back at this at Wednesday. Gandalf will be here. It's going to be a pre-recorded interview, so it will be released on Wednesday evening. So with that, take care.
Good night.